All right, Tyler. So we're reading You Are the Happiness You Seek, Uncovering the Awareness of Being,
Mm,
whatever the hell that means, by Mr.
wow.
Rupert Spira. So
Wait. 1 second.
yeah,
Who the fuck are you?
that's a great question. I'm an unlabeled bottle. That's as close as I will get to a label, at least for
Cool.
this fun spiritual conversation.
I'm gonna call this unlabeled bottle Jason for now. You might call this unlabeled bottle Tyler if you please. You don't have to. You could just call me bottle. Empty bottle.
Are
Hey,
you
EB, what's up, Dad?
a beer bottle, wine bottle? Are you a oil bottle? Well,
Probably
olive oil.
champagne. Probably empty
All right.
champagne bottle. Yeah, it's the emptiness of the celebration.
All right.
So, Jason, today we're here because we're going to start this book club that we've been talking about for a little while. We
Yeah.
are, like you said, going to get into the book You Are the Happiness You Seek by Rupert Spira. Do you have like any knowledge about like Rupert's background that you could share? I really don't know too much about him. This is actually the first book of his I've really fully invested in.
Got it. So this is what I do know. I saw him live for a 3-day retreat here in Seattle, 2018, I think it was, or 2019. It was before COVID. And then he was coming back in March of whatever 2020, and they had to cancel it because
I
of
remember
COVID.
that. I was considering going that. That was actually in the Bay Area. I think you were considering going, and I was going to.
Well, he does. No, he was going to come back to Seattle. However,
Oh,
to your point, he has every 6 months he does a week-long retreat in the Bay Area. He does one in near where Salemi lives,
mm-hmm.
and he does one in upstate New York. So he does those every 6 months. So he's a UK Brit guy. He's supposed to be a world-class potter, and
Potter.
yeah,
Potter?
pottery.
Like
Yes,
pottery.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And from what I've
Good to know.
learned is he's been fascinated with spirituality since he can remember as a child.
Mhm.
So I would assume my story is he's been pretty biased to spiritual topics since a teenager. Did a lot of mantra meditation for like 20 plus years, dabbled
Mm.
in all kinds of spiritual traditions. From what I understand, it led him to go to India, and he started getting into also non-duality, um,
Do you know
Advaita.
whose guru was there? If you had
I
one.
don't remember. He says it, but I don't remember who that was. And so Advaita Vedanta, and then also
Yeah.
Kashmir stuff. He was been heavily influenced by. He had a teacher by the name of Francis Lucille, who's a
Yes, I
non-dual
remember.
teacher,
Yeah.
and who was a student of Gene Klein from the
Okay.
back in the day. Kind of a little bit of a lineage that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And since then, he's been since been or basically all along been teaching, and yeah, so he's written, I don't know, about 10 books by now.
Yeah.
The one book that I read that I got really hooked is called The Nature of Consciousness. That was
Mm-hmm.
super cool. That led me to into a gentleman by the name of Bernardo Kastrup. He's a dual PhD. He's got a PhD in computer science and also a PhD in philosophy. And he's a pretty prestigious computer science engineer, one of the top institutes over in Europe. Anyway, he's a philosopher. And he's come to the same conclusion as Rupert has, but from a scientific background,
Oh,
which has been pretty
interesting.
interesting. Yeah. So he kind of brings a lot of the left brain elements to this conclusion, which we can get into here. And then Rupert's more of the Eastern philosophy and Christian mystics. And Rupert's also pretty big into Sufism and appreciates the poetry and writings as a writer, and etc.
I love that he threw in some Rumi quotes and story there.
Yeah.
I actually noted some of that. We'll get into that.
Yeah. So that's what I know of him.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. You're a professional. You're so good. I love you. You're the best.
Hugs and kisses.
So obviously, like, you know, you're already a student of his in some way, so you were going to buy the book naturally.
Right.
Is there anything that you anticipated in getting this book that might have been different from the previous, or why you might have looked forward to this book, You Are the Happiness That You Seek?
I was really hoping that he would be writing a book that kind of encapsulates all the main theme that he speaks about, but it's embedded in different aspects of his books, but just in pieces here and there in conjunction with a bunch of other topics or avenues he goes in. So because of my past relationships and what I learned about living life is that when we become codependent on our happiness with the outside world, we set ourselves up for this roller coaster ride. You know, if
I don't know anything about this.
Yeah, I don't either. You know, if she does or he does X, I feel happy. When they do the opposite, I feel angry or pissy. And, you know, I learned enough for me to have the consequences of that approach, of which to me is pervasive in all of humanity. And he had been talking about this idea that what you're looking for, you are. And initially I was captivated by that. And that's really been the nugget or the seed that was planted. And so we've shared, you and I, different texts, and I sent you that one meditation on the idea that basically to stop or end your getting your needs met outside, i.e. your happiness and love outside of finding it within. And that is the definition of insanity, misery, suffering.
And expecting different results as well when doing the same thing.
Yeah. So I thought of it as, okay, if there's a book that maybe encapsulates that's only dedicated to this theme, I was hoping number two is just to maybe hardwire, you know, etch in stone, metaphorically, this concept and these teachings as I continue to bathe and marinate in them and feel my own version of a transition, of little by little, of disrobing this codependency. And when I'm triggered, come back to, well, who is the one that's triggered? And you know, and what is it really that I'm triggered about?
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that and break that down a little bit further as we unravel the concepts as we go through the chapters.
Yeah.
That's I'm just, you know, that's with the question, who is it that's triggered? It sounds like a simple question. It's not at all a simple answer based on the way that he teaches anything. So if you're watching, people, stay tuned, because you don't know who the fuck you are yet. Okay, so the first thing, you know, in opening the book, it starts off with a little quote that I'd like to read. And you know, you can offer any perspective on it that you might like, and then we'll continue down the chapters for the first 3 chapters today. This first quote is by T.S. Eliot, and it says, "And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." And if you guys have read, oh, that's so cute.
Yes, I love it.
What are you, Cupid?
Yeah, I'm a Cupid.
Yeah. Do you have anything to offer in regards to that? And if not, then
Well, I don't know. Well, the one thing that came up was it feels like, the first half of life, you're striving and yanging the shit out of life and trying to figure shit out and get ahead. And then you have that midlife crisis and say, what is this all for?
Yeah.
Is what came up when I read it. And then you ultimately come back and say, I've been striving and actually going nowhere because I have been unveiled. I can't see myself for myself in a legit context. And so, you end up trying. It's almost like, what is it? There's the biblical story about the golden child. Isn't the golden child? I don't know.
The prodigal son,
the
right?
prodigal son. Thank you. So
he refers to that in one of the first 3 chapters, right?
Yeah, I think so. So that's
Yeah.
another story that reminds me of what this is really getting at.
Yeah, and so and I actually made a note of that as well. There's a couple things just in this, we could break down this beautiful quote for a long time, but John always, the 3 prayers and journeys of wisdom, one of which is return me to childlike innocence. And this quote essentially is to arrive where we started and to know it for the first time. That's, coming back to our youth, the way that we see the world as a child, the freshness of perspective, the innocence of exploration. Like, that's what all of this is about. That's what all of this work is about, is coming back to that place. And maybe even before birth, that place that we were before that, if we believe in such things there too. Another way to look at it.
I like it.
Yeah. Okay. So chapter 1 is called The Search for Happiness. Do you have anything that really stood out to you in the beginning of this book in chapter 1?
Before we do that, I just want to go back to one of the last on page 3 on the top. I'm just going to read it because I just think it's cool. And I just put for myself a note, like the bottom line. And he says, it is obvious that I have loved happiness above all else. I was also clear that nothing objective is certain or secure, and clearly does not unfold according to one's own wishes and expectations. And now the absurdity and futility of investing one's desire for lasting happiness in objective experiences or experience was inescapable. I don't know. I just loved it.
Yeah. No, that's great as well. And somehow I didn't even note that. But that actually, it's a good segue into like the first chapter. He starts to talk about objective experience and form. Right. And that was like one of those concepts I was like, that's not something that most people would grasp really easily. So I'm going to kind of open the door to invite people to consider what objective experience is, because most of us, when we think about experiencing life through our lens, we might say, this is subjective. This is my experience. This is the subject here experiencing this for me. But what he's saying is that what we might be experiencing is an objective form in which things arise within our awareness. Does that sound correct to you?
Yeah, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, so what he's inviting us to consider is that anything that arises within our awareness, within Tyler's awareness, that means sensations, that means trailer wall, that means thoughts, all of that is an objective experience.
Yeah.
And that is a form. He describes it as somewhere in here. Things that might take shape, even if it's not perceivable like a thought.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. So thoughts, sensations, stories, memories, anything mental that comes up in our awareness, anything that's physically felt in the body, anything with our 5 senses that we taste, touch, hear, smell, see, are I would, yeah, lump all of that and piggyback on what you just shared as quote objective experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, I thought that was important.
And I think the other thing that I think is important that it took me, like I had to connect the dots, is that includes events,
Yeah.
Relationships,
Relationships, yeah.
Business dealings and workings are all part of objective experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything,
Yeah.
everything that's really the point, honestly. It's like, it's literally everything that we are able to kind of grasp at, and not even necessarily with our hands, but like, if I'm able to focus on what a thought might have been, that is an object of my experience.
Right. And I think okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the reason why I believe he really like starts the book off listing these things is because it's important for us to know that these things are outside of something else, which we will get to. These things are outside of our perception, or outside of our awareness, I guess I'm trying to say. They are not a part of what we are. They are separate. They are different.
Touche. Okay.
Suck on that. What does it taste like?
Virtually, I don't know.
This is Two Dudes Unfiltered Spirituality. Maybe that's the name. Unfiltered Spirituality.
Okay, bring it on.
So do you believe, anything to wrap up on that thought, why objective experience, objective form might be an important thing for people to understand when we're looking at the world?
Yeah, so Tyler, I think that's really important. And I think defining terms are important in the sense of where we're coming from, because I think sometimes people may, in my estimation, misunderstand or misrepresent what these words actually are trying to communicate, to consider things from a different perspective. So, for me, for example, when you were giving voice to what you're sharing about objective experience, I think what he's really inviting us to do is to ultimately explore ourselves in a way that says, can I untangle myself from identifying my identity as to who and what I am with thoughts, sensations, or my body, which is also, I think over time we'll have to smooth this out. Sometimes some people use the idea that the body doesn't lie, or the body is always truthful. The body keeps account. Well, while that might be true, also, though, if we identify ourselves with our personality, our beliefs, our body, what it looks like in the images and everything, that we're not those things.
Yeah.
And then that's where we get ourselves into trouble. And that's why when we attach to objective experience, i.e. our personality, our body, our ideas, our relationships, we abandon ourselves, quote unquote, and seek happiness through those means.
Yeah, I think it's easy for us, everybody, humans, to be like, oh, I am not this couch. I am not this object. Easy, obviously, right?
Right.
But when it comes to a thought, something that we don't have language around identifying of like what it is. What is a thought? It is an objective experience. It's something that is there. It is taking shape, but it's within us, and it's not in a full, like a matter kind of form. So I don't know where I was going with that one, but thank you for that clarification and offering. So I guess the next question I have for you is, do you believe what he says, that everything that we do, no matter what it is for the ultimate experience of achieving happiness, air quotes, or whatever you might want to call it? If you have a different word that you prefer to call it, he invites us to consider different words for it too.
Right. So are you asking, is the ultimate effort that we're trying to do in this lifetime is to find happiness?
Yes.
Is that what I would, I've sat with that, I meditated on that. I have explored my own motivations. You know, we've talked a lot about the Enneagram, and we've talked about triangles and different philosophies and models that I've developed for me personally over time. And I would always come back to answering or saying yes, like whether it's happiness or love or peace or serenity, whatever word we want to say or use that fills our mojo. I think
Mhm.
ultimately we're trying,
End of suffering.
yeah, which is synonymous with the alleviating oneself of suffering for sure.
So is it actually about happiness, or is it actually about the end of suffering? And do those two things happen in the same place of the brain?
I don't know. I'd have to do some more legwork on the what actual
Be
part of the
be a
brain.
fucking neuroscientist, dude.
Um, I guess in this moment, what comes up for me is that um, that happiness to me, I know the word happiness is kind of this is like an example which we were talking about, the nomenclature of the word happiness, and people think, well, the opposite of happiness is sadness, and you know, the polarities. My understanding of when he says happiness is that he's talking about a state which you are aware of your eternal, dimensionless, um, vast openness of being. And I know that's like woo-woo spiritual terms as I hear myself say that shit. Um, it's less about an actual emotional state of being happy. That's not what he's trying to communicate. That's why sometimes the word
Yeah.
happiness is a little seductive. So for me, it's not about arriving at or seeking pleasure and joy and happiness in the traditional language. It is finding that you are the equanimity, the tranquility, the eternal vast, um, the dimensionless elements of our
Yeah.
beingness. Um,
So it's a
and
little bit more than just the word captures, is what you're saying. Like happiness doesn't quite encapsulate that whole thing.
No, he taught, and that's why I think in my experience of watching him in a lot of videos in his other books, he tries to go at length to really be clear about how he's defining happiness, and people who
Yeah.
follow him for a fair amount of time inherently know that or go into that understanding that. But on the outside looking in, just getting exposed to it, it might lead us to conclude something that unless we get our teeth and sink our teeth into something, into what he's trying to share, we might have a misinterpretation.
I hear you. Okay. Well, we're moving right along here.
What page you on, homeboy?
I'm just in the first chapter, moving along.
Okay.
But in the section, it's called the end of the search. If you want to go back, let me know if you want to go back.
Hold on one
But
second. So I think I just found this. So on the bottom of page 6, he says, I use the word happiness as the goal of this search, meaning searching for who and what we are as a being.
oh yeah,
Simply because it is the common word for the absence of suffering or the end of seeking. I've referred to it this way because I believe, rightly or not, that this word most accurately conveys the majority of people that for which they long above all else. In particular, it's non-denominational, devoid of cultural overtones, and it does not have to be believed in, and is its own evidence.
Yeah.
And then he talks about some of the limitations of it. So just give a shout out to his context.
Yeah, especially like the line that says, the only thing we seek for its own sake.
Yeah, I like that too.
Cool. I don't have anything to reflect back to you on that, but I think it was a good little nugget for people to chew on.
And just real quick, he says, please substitute it, meaning happiness, with another: fulfillment, contentment, peace, love, truth, beauty, joy, salvation, liberation, etc. So
that's those different words that can be applied to the same whatever meaning you're placing on that state of end of suffering, contentment, whatever you want to call it. So in the section, like I said, the end of the search, he refers to a poem by Rumi. And the reason why I thought it was, I don't know, a nice little poem is because, well, relative to that quote that we said at the beginning, you end up at the place that you started. The poem by Rumi it describes the same thing. It's somebody who's on a journey for a treasure and finds themselves back exactly where they started. The treasure is buried right below where he was living, right underneath his house. And it's the same story as The Alchemist. Did you ever read The Alchemist?
I have it on my shelf. I've not read it yet.
So I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if Paulo Coelho, whatever his name is, whatever the author's name of The Alchemist is, got that general story from the Rumi poem, because it's like spot on, exactly the same. But in general, I think it's similar to the hero's journey in some way. It is the seeking that you described earlier, the strife that we have to go through to realize that when we come back home and we share our gifts, when we apply what we've learned through our journeys, that coming back, that is the place. That's the place that we're all looking for. So I guess my question to you with all of this is, does there have to be a struggle? Does there have to be a strife? Does there have to be a near-death experience to find ourselves back at that original place that we know all to be true, and happiness and contentment to be resting there?
I think it's a good question. I would say by default, it seems for me, my own journey and others that I've either coached with or talked with, I think there's a patterning where this veiling of knowing ourselves is inherent within our conditioning as a child, our culture, etc. And so we get lost in not knowing who we are. And I think we go out in a journey thinking we know what life is, or that we are seeking what life is all about, directly or indirectly. And then over time, the consequences of life keep on highlighting that what I am ultimately seeking for, I am, or you like that Sufi poem that you said, you end up coming back to the original place and realizing that your heart, your essence is the gold that you've been searching for, your divinity, whatever you want to call it. And, you rest there. You say, I finally figured out. Now, for me, most people, that there is some kind of, if you want to call it Joseph Campbell, like a hero's journey. There seems to be that myth for humanity to play in that sandbox. So I would subscribe to say overall, yes.
I just had the thought, like, I wonder if God imprinted a code in human DNA that it must go through these loops and bounds and struggles to find like that perfect formula to come back to that place of whatever. And maybe the enlightened beings that have, been in this realm have gone through that code perfectly, and that's the game.
Yeah. For some, they might take 10 years, might take 50 years for others. I don't know.
Could never happen in this lifetime too.
That's another topic. Yeah, we could.
For many people, I'm sure it's not.
But what you're saying, really, I think, on the previous page, I think is a great piggyback on what you're getting at. In the middle, it says, from this point of view, he talks of, well, it's okay. Suffering, the sense of lack, that I lack or that I'm separate, is understood as the veiling or the obscuring of our innate happiness. Thus, there is either happiness or the veiling of it, but never its absence. And I think when we go on the journey, the really fucked up thing that either you get the light bulb and you have an aha moment, for me was where when we realize that we literally have what we're searching for, it's like the scales come off the eyes, or the bugs on the window get finally cleaned off and say, oh shit, I've been striving, but it's been with me all along. This happiness, I've just been wearing a cloak and a coat and a hat, and I've been treating it like it's 30 degrees below and I'm all bundled up, and I can't see my naked body underneath all of this shit, and then I think for me the metaphor is that life ends up helping you realize that you're taking off these different garments, and ultimately you get to the naked man looking in the mirror.
I think if awareness is present in those that are journeying, that's possible. I also think that the veiling can continue on until death.
The veiling can, but not the happiness, right? Or what he would say is the veiling can continue, but the underlying loving presence can't be extinguished, because it is.
Correct. Yeah, I hear you.
And
a simple metaphor is, just the sun. I think he uses the sun or light or something like that somewhere along the line in one of these chapters. The sun is always shining, right?
Right.
I'm either inside and my home is preventing the light from shining through, but the sun is still shining out there, right? I am choosing to be inside here to veil myself from that light.
Yeah.
And I can step outside if I want to.
Right.
Cool. So there's one line, and again, feel free to rewind me. I'm jumping to page 10.
Mm-hmm.
At this rate, we're never going to get through these 3 chapters, but that's okay. So tell me what you think about the line, "Becoming must subside in being."
Okay, where are you at again?
So it's page 10.
Yeah, I'm on
literally
10.
Directly in the middle.
Yeah.
It's the end of a really small middle paragraph. The paragraph starts at the heart of all the world's great religious, spiritual, and philosophical traditions lies the simple, direct means by which it may be recognized. Becoming must subside in being.
So you're asking me what's my 2 cents on that one? Or what's your 2 cents on that one?
Yeah, the line just fucking struck me when I read it. Becoming must subside in being, because he doesn't really, at least to my recollection, I've not come across this concept. I guess I have, but I don't know, the way he said it in this and led into it just really slapped me across the face. But I guess what it means to me is kind of what you said, is just recognizing that the veil is there, and that happiness, our essence, is there as well, and that is always present. And the veil, if awareness is brought to it, is the choice that we have to set that aside and recognize that in our being, which is always there, we find what we're looking for, which is happiness or contentment, whatever. So the becoming actually is the becoming is the being.
Yeah, I think that's why I think they have in the Heart Sutra in Buddhism, they talk about which even there's a version which Einstein, I guess, refers to something similar, is that form is emptiness and emptiness is form.
That's kind of like a quantum physics thing, right? Concept.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
from a spiritual standpoint, it's kind of a heart suture reference. And then there is Einstein from the scientific side of things, talking about the same concept, but through the different, from what I understand, from a scientific lens. I do like, I mean, if people really wanted to dabble in his work, he's got some pretty cool metaphors. What comes up for me is reminding myself in this moment that there's a metaphor of the screen in a movie.
Yeah.
And that the screen is, if you will, our essence, our being. And that he talks about that the coloring or the modulation of the screen that depicts a movie going on the screen, or is the screen it's not like a movie is being superimposed on top of the screen. So basically, to not forget that the form, the perception that we think of as form, is nothing other than a modulation of our essence to begin with. And when we don't recognize that to me is the veiling. When we forget that there is a screen, like when we're watching a movie, if you forget that it's playing on a fucking screen because the whole screen is taken up with, or at least most of the screen is taken up with the movie, you get sucked into the movie, you're crying, you're screaming, you're happy, if you're really sucked into a good movie, right? And you totally forget that it's one screen that's being played at one time.
Yeah.
And I just think that is an anchoring metaphor for me when we get into, so that we're ultimately not creating a dualistic interpretation.
Gotcha. Yeah. Something that came up for me in that, in this line, and in something else you mentioned, is that, you know, what John always talks about, the paradox of all things, right? Like the becoming and the being paradoxically lie within each other, and that is the essence of many experiences, right? Like we're I guess if you can recognize the polarity in each side of becoming and being in this example, you find a lot of your answers in that dance between the two.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the North Pole and the South Pole, but they're all on one pole. There's a unicity about it all, and that we just perceive it as duality. That's because of, I think, you know, our brain and our body mechanisms are in place, and the five senses to interpret it as such. But anyway,
does Rupert get into duality in general in this book? I guess we're not there yet. He might.
We're not there yet, but I don't recall him talk. I mean, he talks in terms of non-dual and duality. My experience of him is that he brings people through questioning and inquiring for them to come to realize who they are, and that it's everything, and everything is one unified field.
Yeah, I think he'll probably get into more of that later on down the road, because you mentioned the term duality, but I'm not sure we've really explained it, but we'll get there. All right, so wrapping up chapter 1, anything else as we enter chapter 1 that you might want to address?
So page 11, just real quick, in the middle, I think this is really super cool, just so it's recorded. There comes a point in many of our lives when we understand, or at least intuit, that the peace and happiness for which we long can never be found in an object, a substance, an activity, circumstance, or relationship. This understanding does not imply that we lose interest in the world, or that we no longer engage with objects, activities, relationships, but simply that we no longer do so for the purposes of finding peace, happiness, and love in them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fucking bang on. I mean, that, it's not about sitting on a fucking Zen cushion and etc. It's about engaging and dancing with life as fully as one is capable of, but yet knowing that I arrive my own happiness and love from within, and I share it with the world versus saying I'm gonna get it through these experiences and fill my cup that way. So I just
Now,
thought
do you think this realization is possible without having gone to the extreme of I'm alone, I'm on that Zen cushion?
I think it's possible. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I actually noted a line down that page as well. Essentially what he's referring to there and what he says at the bottom is that nothing can make us happy. These things, these activities, these relationships, nothing can make us that way.
Right.
And nothing inversely can make us unhappy. So if those things go away, they can't truly make us unhappy because the happiness, as we're calling it, is always there, right? It's just our perception of it coming and going that we place story and emotion onto.
Yeah, he says
we're giving it the power to influence us. And I think that's a good line, like to share with people, in that you do have the power to control the way that you experience your experiences. I'd say in general, the victimhood in society is like, no, everything is happening to me, right? And that's just, a perception.
Okay, bring it on, brother.
Cool, bring it on. Chapter 2.
Let me just double check. I do think it's worth noting.
I don't.
Like towards the middle, he says, he talks about
what?
In the middle of the page of 12, it says suffering. Our
Page
suffering,
1.
whether it be intense emotional hatred, anger, jealousy that erupts temporarily in response to a particular circumstance, or simply a mild chronic feeling that something is missing, is the litmus test that indicates that we've overlooked our essential nature of being, and that as a result, our innate peace and happiness have been obscured. And I don't know if it's this section or in the future. I think it's in the future. It is in the future. He talks about the difference between psychological suffering and physical pain.
Yeah.
Which I do, which at some point it would be good to just your take on that one.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Cool.
All right, so we're gonna move on to chapter 2 now. This is called Know Thyself. So just based on like the first couple of pages, what I believe that he's trying to show us here essentially is that now the path is being laid out for us in how we actually find happiness. And it starts by knowing what we are.
Mm-hmm.
What am I? What are you? And what are we all? Which is essentially the same thing, but this is the bleeding into that realization. And I just love this term, that the Sanskrit word Satchit Ananda, meaning simply that to know the nature of one's being is happiness itself. How? What is the nature of our being?
Yeah, it's like
that's an easy one, huh?
I don't know if it's easy. I think again it goes to the paradox. It's so difficult at times, and yet it's the most simplest question, and it's right underneath our noses, right? That's the paradox.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I think you made a video on this one time about who are you? Like we take it for granted. Like when I've done this in the past with myself and with others. And if we were to really strip that away to say, okay, if you aren't your body, if you aren't your personality, if you aren't sensations or emotions or beliefs, which are concepts, if we were to remove all of that, what are you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah,
Good.
I was going to say, and then if you just then therefore experience that and see what comes up for each one of us, to me, that's the screen. It's not a non-existence. It's not an annihilation. It is an experience of just non-objective experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah, he gets into that in the beginning of page 16, where essentially what he's saying is that we're bypassing finding our joy and our happiness in objective experience outside of us and going straight to the source of it, which is in ourself, in our being. And again, a little bit, we haven't really like broken that down, like how is happiness in our being yet, but we're getting there. And I really appreciated, but he does, so in reference to your questioning of self, like who am I really? He gets into that as well. But before I want to dive into that question, something that I practice, like it really struck me when he shared a story on page 16 of, he was really young and he went to a music show and was listening to music. He found himself going in between the layers of his objective experience, which was the witnessing of the music and the show. And then the fact that he was aware, he would shift back and become aware that he was aware of the show. Right. So he's going back and forth, and he discovered just, randomly that he could shift and actually choose to go in between those two things. Is there a time in your life, Jay, that when did you really become aware that you had this thing, this place that you can shift into to have a different perspective on things?
The first time I had a visceral experience with this was in 1995, November of 1995, actually.
Wow, is the November important?
For me, it is, because as I'm
Okay.
recalling it, I'm actually going back in the memory and viscerally recalling how I had an experience, my version of that in my personal life, and that I was able to actually be aware of my objective experience, and it was overwhelmingly afraid. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't, like, it was my first time ever experiencing anything like that. It was like an unmerging from being in the movie.
What happened though? Like what provoked it?
To tell you what provoked it.
I mean, sometimes these things just happen, on their own accord for no good reason. I mean, that's kind of the nature of consciousness. I think we think we are controlling it, but not really.
I would say to this day, it's just, I don't know. The minute I try to label it, I think I lose the spirit of it. It just happened. That's all I could say. I had this event.
How old were you?
95. I would have been 24, 23, 24.
Yeah.
And it totally was a game changer in shifting my perspective about being a human being. This whole idea of separate, going formally in and out of objective experience, witnessing it. It was intimidating, overwhelming, afraid, shocked, and also a hint, a splash of coolness. Like, wow, okay.
Yeah, there's this new place you just discovered.
Yeah. How about you? Any of your
Um, Nothing really stands out. I mean, in general, around 25 is when I started to get into meditation and all of these concepts and whatnot. Get out of here, dog. um, Honestly, I just have to say it. It's not exactly what we're talking about, but it's similar. Like my first journeys of wisdom, there was a moment in time when something big really happened, like unexplainably big, in how I started to walk the world for some amount of time during that course in that awareness at all times. Like even when we stepped out of the classroom, I was walking down the street 100% in tune with that awareness. And it felt kind of overwhelming at the time. Like I actually remember it in my body pretty well as well, because there was so much awareness of my body and so much awareness of everything that was happening around me, and just fully embodied awareness. I feel like I kind of shut down what I thought was Tyler, and I was just, walking in that space. So it was just weird at the time. But now, like reflecting back on that and realizing for me what that experience was, is like, that's actually what I'm looking for all the time now. I'm looking to be in that place of the presence of my awareness at all times. So it's nice to have that moment to reflect on and realize that's what I was dancing with at the time. Does that kind of make sense? Make sense to you? Does my experience make sense to you?
My experience of your experience of your experience of my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So something that he lays out, going at the very bottom of 16 to into 17 really well, is he talks about the three elements of his experience. And this just kind of might allow the listener to understand a little bit more what we're talking about, the different levels of awareness. So he talks about the external world, the one consisting of what he's describing as the concert hall, the audience, the music. All of these things are outside, right? And then another layer of his experience is his mind, his body, things that are, air quotes, his. And that's like his internal world, the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, which are all form and objective experience as well. And then the third layer of his experience is the fact that he is aware of his awareness of all those things.
The background.
Yeah, the background. And what he's doing, or what he's sharing in this story, is how he's going back and forth from all three of those layers. And it's a really fucking fun little drill. Like if you want to practice that for yourself, anybody listening, that's something I do, is just become aware of the different layers there. It's kind of crazy to just play with going back and forth in your awareness of, there's this further one, there's this closer one, and then there's my core.
Well said.
Cool. Anything else? Let's see. Do you want to get into that question a little bit more? Who am I really? He gets into that in page 17.
Yeah. He talks about, am I the thoughts, feelings, or sensations, or am I aware of, or am I the one that is aware of them? It became obvious that whatever, at the bottom, it became obvious that whatever it is that knows our thoughts and images is not itself a thought and image. What is that? Whatever
I love those lines.
Yeah, whatever it is that is aware of our feelings and sensations is not itself a feeling and sensation. What is that? And he says, whatever it is that perceives the world is not itself a sight, sound, taste, texture, or smell. What is that? It's simply It is simply that which knows or is aware. It is our self. It is awareness or consciousness itself. Um, the one thing that I really have liked, and I've done this with myself and with clients, is if to really belabor this point is like, okay, if you lost an arm or had an appendix taken out or etc., does a part of you leave when it gets amputated? And everyone would say no. I'm like, the sense of I, regardless of how many limbs I have on my body, still pervades, right? And then I've done this with myself to say, okay, if I can become really aware of thoughts coming and going and emotions coming and going, and we've talked about vipassana. If you want to scan the body and see thoughts or sensations in the body bubble up, where do they bubble up? And the whole idea around sit of determination is to sit and not react or respond to a sensation, even if it's tingly or you want to itch yourself. And eventually it subsides on its own and you've done nothing, even though it might be an intense sensation to do so. And at no point when these things come and go does that sense of I, before you say I am a man or I am whatever, but just this I-ness that a lot of people like him talk about is what still remains. And he's really inviting us to say, what is that? What is that element of the self that remains and is constant throughout life? And I think to me that was really helpful in the past to really belabor the point or belabor the understanding within myself to say, I am not my body. From an identity standpoint, I am not a thought, an emotion, a sensation, an experience.
Definitely. And I'd say he gets into that in the next section. It's called letting go.
Mm-hmm.
But he transitions into that in saying, and I think that's a big jump, a really important jump behind his teachings is realizing that, yeah, I'm not my body. But how, in fact, are we awareness? Because he said that is the first great understanding. I am awareness. It's not me that is experiencing awareness. I am awareness itself. Do you have a grasp on that jump? It's tough. It was actually tough for me to kind of
So can you
transition into
phrase
that.
your question, maybe what phrase it in another question or in a question?
Well, I guess in the line that he states, he says, the understanding I am awareness is the first great understanding.
Right.
It's not me that is experiencing awareness. I am, in fact, awareness itself. So is there a way that you grasp that jump? Like for you, like how do you understand that you are, in fact, awareness itself?
So if I were to piggyback on what I was just saying, so sometimes when I'm sitting with myself around these questions, and if I were to peel the onion and say, okay, if I'm not the body, not the personality, I'm not the sensations or emotions, and so then I get into, okay, am I aware? He asks this question a lot. He just simply says, am I aware of just being aware? Not necessarily aware of anything, etc., but just which is it's a question that gets to your point. Are you just aware, aside from objective experience, which we've talked about? And then to me, if you investigate that experience, then I would say is, for me, how that looked like, it says, okay, I'm aware of just being aware. And then as I experience that, then I ask myself questions like, are there any borders? Are there any boundaries? If I could try to describe this experience of just being aware, it's adjectives like spaciousness. I don't know where I can, in my literal experience, I don't know where I end and where Tyler begins. I don't have any boundaries. I can't say, if I'm not my body, I have, this really plays games with our ego parts. I just don't have any borders or boundaries in this awareness, in this experiencing of awareness, right? So then that to me is what plays into this, being able to cultivate an answer for myself about your question.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And for me, I think what allowed me to grasp that was him kind of laying out that, like, again, I'm not this body. The body is an object of my experience as well. So he's unmerging with all of those objective experiences. First, I am not all these things. I am not all these things. If I'm not all these things, what am I? And then you come to, I am awareness, because that's what's left. That's the only thing that's left and present within everything else, right? And that's something that he gets into in one of the sections. It's like, yeah, when there's nothing else, what are we? See,
Yeah,
anything?
he says,
Good.
in other words, we are not essential. Essentially, our thoughts, images, memories, or stories about our life. We are that which knows them. We are not essentially our feelings and sensations. We are that which is aware of them. We are not the sight, sounds, tastes, textures, and smells that constitute our experience of the world. We are that which perceives them. We are nothing that is experienced. We are that which experiences. We are not essentially anything that we are aware of. We are simply the fact of knowing, being aware, or awareness itself. If I were to summarize what what we're trying to get at.
Yeah, let's just read the whole book, and then people will understand. No, I that really does sum it up. And that's kind of, again, he's saying we are not these things, right? Like, we are not these things. We are that which sees them. We are not these things. We are that which perceives them. We are not all these things, and then we are that thing that is able to witness all of the above. I'd say what he kind of briefly brushes on in the end section of chapter 2 is letting go of certain things that we hold our identity attached to. And I think one of the most difficult things in letting go of is people, and how it's not just the stories that we hold about ourselves, but it's the stories that we hold about ourselves in the presence of others that mean something to us, actually shape our identity as well. And letting go of those could be really difficult. So I guess what I'm asking you is, in regards to others, and maybe you like to share about your personal experiences of late, but like, how are you recognizing what Rupert is teaching you through your reflection of your identification in those that you are around or have lost?
Well, one, I've had the blessings of the consequences of past relationships teaching me that when I was dependent upon them to behave or do certain things, and if they didn't, how angry or frustrated I would get. So that has accumulated enough of experiences in my body and my mind, so to speak. I wouldn't even say my body and my mind. I guess now it gets a real challenge to use language in a way that embodies our conversation, even more so than just journeys of wisdom stuff. Okay. And then in my current partnership, this has been a bedrock principle that we've had from pretty much from day one, that we're very, very clear with each other to say, I don't need you, but I want you in my life. And then there is a periodic checking with each other to say, if we want to apply the 80-20 rule of neediness, right? That 80% of the time I'm self-parenting and 20% I'm outsourcing that to my partner. If you want to use that principle, or just the overall approach is, if we believe somehow that there is this line that's getting crossed of codependency in a way that needs a check-in, needs a conversation, then we will have it, and then have Rupert and journeys and all these things that we've learned over time as context and language and reference points within our mind to have those honest conversations. Am I starting to be codependent? And last thing I'll say is, like, if I do or don't do certain things for her or vice versa, I do notice myself still triggering myself at times. And so, okay, then I come back to myself and really double down on my emphasis of what's going on internally. And am I trying to outsource my happiness for them to fix it on my behalf? So that's how I've been trying to practice it. Not perfect by all means. However, I think there's a mutual commitment to it, which makes it very important, because it's hard for one to agree to it and the other not. Or if you're agreeing to it at a speed learner pace versus another pace, it just can create a gap for me, in my opinion, on how to reconcile some of this stuff, because it can be challenging for people to take honesty and inventory for themselves. So that's how I've been trying to practice it. What about you?
I love that. And I'd say, well, the question that came up for me that I think would be helpful for me, this is not something I've practiced, just an idea that just popped up, is if both partners are on the same page, or anybody for that matter, if I'm in a relationship with anybody, this matter, dad, mom, romantic partner, whatever, and I ask them, who are you really? And they say to me, I am this thing that perceives and is aware of all things around me. To have somebody declare to me, when I ask them the question, what they really are, which in some way means that they realize that they are not anything in regards to me. You get what I'm saying? It's kind of like cutting the string between us. Like, they don't need me, because they know who and what they really are, which is awareness. They are the presence of awareness, and that there's nothing here as far as attachment goes. Does that make sense? Anyways, I just think that asking anybody, of course, they could say something totally different and not be on the same page. But if they were on the same page of what this book is teaching, and they share that with me after I ask them, I'd be like, great. We both know what we are. And now we can thrive in what that is. And it's just more pure. Less attachments, less expectations.
Yeah, it reminds me when we were in Journeys of Wisdom class together, and I think it was one of those moments that I think John was talking about the idea that he talked about the idea of some version of I don't need you but want you, but it was more I'm trying to pull it from the ethos.
Guess what? It's not working.
Thanks. It was along the lines of the relief one feels by not assuming the responsibility to play the mom and dad or the savior or rescuer role, and how liberating that feels to not have to over-index on playing that role anymore. And so if I were to bridge it, I mean, that's basically what he's really getting at is, but I think for me, I've come to appreciate that he's being a little bit more directive with the context of awareness, this awareness idea of what that really means and how to anchor into that. Because to me, even if I were to say, I'm not responsible for you, it feels like potentially there might be some ungrounded floating. Well, what the hell does that really mean? And what does that mean for
For
me
sure.
if I'm not responsible? Be
Yeah.
that as it may, that's what also comes up.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Whatever way, and of course, it's always a unique dance when you're doing that with somebody else, because nobody's going to see things exactly the way that you are. And it can actually be offensive, right, to people that aren't on the same page. They're like, "What do you mean I'm not this thing to you? What do you mean I'm not? What do you mean I'm not, a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a wife or a father?" People attach to those things, and that's fine.
Yeah, I remember the first time I told Heather, I was fascinated by the concept that we do not love each other, but we love our experiences of each other.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And and she basically flipped me the bird. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
get
Yeah.
the hell out of here with that.
Totally. Yeah. That's
But
tough.
but it's like everything else. For me, you have these initial opinions and ideas, but when you really sit with them and poke, like, what does it really mean? Can I truly love another person? And you do that
Yeah.
exploration, you realize all I have is my filters, my associations, my conditioning by which I'm interpreting my world view.
Yeah.
And how is it that I can actually love that person when I don't know them? I mean, that was a pretty profound impact in John's class that we had the first time I was introduced to it. And I had my own challenges initially with it.
Yeah. 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 And definitely, definitely a concept we'll get into at some point, I'm sure.
Right.
In regards to chapter 3, though, it doesn't mean anything, so we're going to leave that one behind. So anything you want to wrap up as far as chapter 2 goes?
Um, he talks about this idea on the last page 20. He says, "Let go." I made a note in my book, "Let go" versus "just recognize." We talk in terms of, "Oh, let that shit go," right? Phrase. And one could interpret that phrase as there's some effort, work to be done to quote unquote let it
Uh-huh.
go, versus just recognize, which for me is interpreted as effortless. It's just a recognition of something. And I think this
Yeah.
last, I'll read it because I seem to be in that flow of reading it because it just captures it really well. It says, so it's
Yeah.
not necessarily, that's not, it's not, so it is not necessary to let go of anyone or anything. All that is required is to recognize our essential nature of pure awareness that lies behind all experience and shines in the midst of all experience. Nor will
Yeah.
you lose your ability to think, feel, act, perceive, and relate. On the contrary, these activities will be greatly enhanced by this new understanding of yourself. For the one on whose behalf they arise, and in whose service they are undertaken, will be clearly known.
Yeah. I
I
really
love,
like that.
yeah, I love it just because he, in many ways, doesn't leave too many stones unturned. Like he makes it very practical. It's not
Yeah.
like you're going to have these, like he even belabors the point that he even hates a strong word, but he really dislikes talking in terms of enlightenment because
Mhm.
it's usually some mystical created idea of happiness that's supposed to be like some kind of permanent state. And that's why he's really doesn't use any of that language, because he talks
Yeah.
about it in a real practical being aware of being aware, and then just go live life from that lens of perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it makes sense, like, that why couldn't you still go experience those things and enjoy them even more, right? All those objective experiences, right? Because the
Right.
cup is already full or more full based on your knowing of your awareness, right? The essence of what you are, and then all these other things get to layer on top of that, and it's just additional pleasure of experience, I guess, and not being attached to it at the same time, which makes it so much easier, I think.
Agree.
Great. Great. So chapter 3 is called "Are You Myself?" The quote at the top that I like is, "Home is neither here nor there. Home is within you, or home is nowhere at all," by Herman Hesse.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Let's see here. Anything at the beginning that caught your attention?
I always appreciate the metaphor of the space in the room versus the objects in the room.
Love that. Yeah, I noted that too.
Yeah.
Would you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. He talks in terms that if the space is like the screen metaphor, and the movie colors the screen, or the furniture or people in the room, bring some space and dynamics, dimensions to the room. And he's always inviting us to consider that the room has no resistance. We could be singing and doing a static dance in the room, or we could be doing a full-fledged fight. And that the space in the room is benign to what's occurring in the room. It's just spacious. It's open. It has no resistance to whatever shows up in the space. And
we overlook that space. We don't see that.
Yeah, and I love the idea that it's kind of like a book. We get so focused on the words that we lose the fact that the words cannot come to fruition, can't be read unless we have the background of the white paper. So the white paper, the space between words, the space.
I love that one too. That's cool.
Yeah, I just think we forget the background and focus on the foreground is what he's getting at.
Yeah.
And which is synonymous with we forget the background, i.e. being aware that we are not those things which we're aware of, and we focus on our attention on objective experience in the forefront.
Yeah.
And that's how, to me, what is so seductive or so cool about it and so practical is, like, if you just think now, how much do you pay attention to the space in your RV? How much am I paying attention to my family?
Dude, I just got a little hard on thinking about like playing with the awareness of spaciousness, period.
Yeah.
The gaps in between thoughts, the space in between objects. Super fun.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for pointing that out. And I really like that as well. Do you have awareness deficit disorder?
That is a good diagnosis.
I didn't make it up. I mean, he did in this chapter. That's why I'm asking you. I kind of jumped ahead a little bit.
I said laugh out loud times 10 in my notebook.
I'm just gonna walk around and people will be like, "Do you have ADD, awareness deficit disorder?"
That's a fucking t-shirt right there.
That is actually pretty good. Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be the two dudes dissecting modern spirituality, and our t-shirt's gonna say ADD on it, or something like that.
I love it. Maybe we can even say the title is Awareness Deficit Disorder, but then maybe for the book, I don't know. But we have to think of that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. But the only thing is, like, we I don't know how many books we're going to deviate from that is not quote unquote spiritual.
Oh.
So, like, if we talk about a book on breath
work,
well,
if everything is awareness, then
I'm down with it. We'll just have to be creative, I guess, about it. That's
all. Cool.
Yeah.
Two dudes with awareness deficit disorder.
Fucking love it.
It's
like two men and a baby.
Two men and what?
Two Men and a Baby. It's a movie. Way back
then. That's Schwarzenegger and DeVito?
No, that's twins.
Okay.
Or maybe it was Three Men and a Baby. I don't know. But it was a joke on three guys that were trying to raise this kid.
Cool. Good one.
Yeah, right on.
So the main stuff that I kind of got into it's really just near the end of chapter 3. Is there anything at the beginning of chapter 3 that you felt was worth noting or addressing?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Yeah, I think the main thing that we kind of already alluded to, just to remind everybody, is that in regards to the spaciousness in the room, it's the fact that something like that is so familiar. Light outside, you don't see the light, but you are seeing everything that the light illuminates. It's so familiar that we overlook it. So anything that you might think, anything I might think that I'm overlooking or taking for granted is really what's important to be aware of. Because all that spaciousness, well, there's much more spaciousness, much more in between than there is the actual object.
Well said.
Um,
On page 25, I think this is kind of cool. It says, when we see a mountain, a building, a person, or a movie, we do not mistake it for ourself. They are what we, and this is what you alluded to with the couch, right? They are what we know or experience, not what we are. Likewise, when we encounter a thought, an image, a feeling, or sensation, we simply inquire,
yeah,
are you what I essentially am? These are objects of experience that are known, witnessed, or experienced by us, that is, by awareness. We are no more our thoughts. This is what I fucking loved. My version of excitement was, we are no more our thoughts, images, and feelings and sensations than we are a mountain, a tree, or a movie. I mean,
yeah.
if I sat in that when I read that, and I was just like,
Dang.
fuck. I mean, it feels so visceral to look at a couch and say, I'm not a fucking couch. But to apply that visceral knowing to the thinking, feeling, and sensing that this local organism creates,
yeah,
is just fucking deep, wide, and super profound, in my opinion.
yeah. What he's getting to in this chapter is really beginning to invite us into how can we constantly remind ourselves of what we are, and by asking the question, are you essentially what I am, to your sensations, to your thoughts, to your feelings, to the couch, whatever. Always kind of using that question, self-inquiry, to come back to awareness. And that practice, building that muscle over and over again, is really, really the meat of, at least at the beginning of this book, like how to remind ourselves of those things.
Right.
Anything else? Yeah, so what I like that he called that is the sacred question. I like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just referring back to the sacred question often is going to constantly remind us of, again, what we're striving for in this journey of happiness through awareness.
I mean, I'm going to throw it out there, Tyler, just real quick, so it's recorded for anyone.
No.
But the questions are: who am I really? What is it that knows or is aware of my experience? What is the continuous element in all changing experience? What is it that cannot be removed or separated from me? I mean, those are all variations of the sacred question that you're bringing up, but I just think would be helpful for people to consider nuanced ways to ask themselves the same question.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. Whatever resonates with you at that moment in time, for sure. What for me, it was the question, I don't think it's listed here, but I like asking myself, what am I? Because the what, rather than the who, takes away the Tyler, I
Exactly.
guess. And that helps me a little bit more.
You haven't been the first one to say that. Let's say it that way.
No, I was the first.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you be first in your mind's eye if you want to.
I'm the first today.
I'm going to give you permission.
Cool. The last thing that I have for chapter 3, which will be the end of the day today, is this line near the very end on page 26, where he says, somebody once asked the Indian sage Atmananda Krishna Menon how one knows when one is established in one's true nature. And he replied, when thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions can no longer take you away from yourself. Take that for what it is. Let's continue to build the muscle of knowing what we are and not allow those things to pull us away from it.
Yeah, I had the same section. I was going to say the same thing. That's a really nice way to assess where am I, how established am I. I always love the 3 questions John posed, and I use that all the time, which is how frequently am I triggering myself? When I am triggered, how intense is it?
Yep.
And then the 3rd question is for how long do I sit in that trigger?
Yeah,
So those
frequency, duration, and length.
Yeah. Frequency, duration, and intensity. How frequently am I triggering?
I said length. Yeah, intensity.
And so I always love that, because I know that I actually use that criteria when I'm trying to practice respectful communication and not be violent in my communication around a specific trigger that I know I'm working on. I can ask myself, okay, at least do I see myself practicing or attempting to, am I experiencing less of myself in that way or not?
Yeah, I got you. I appreciate that. And that's definitely a super practical tool for everybody listening, like to come back to your awareness of your experience though, in a trigger, especially.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, you guys, Jay, that's it for the first week of book club. Still determining our name, but it looks like we have some ideas here. No idea how long it went, but there could be some editing involved here. Anything else you want to say wrapping up this first week of book club?
I enjoyed my experience of us going, back and forth with these ideas. I look forward to many more conversations for sure. It's just very helpful talking and feeling into this topic.
For sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to hurt our awareness.
Our awareness, brother.
Even if nobody else likes it, it's not going to hurt our awareness.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, everybody, peace out. See you next week.